Welcome to the Witness Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Trader, and this is episode 16. In Psalms 145, verses 18 through 19, in the New Living Translation, the Bible says, "The Lord is close to all who call on him. Yes, to all who call on him in truth. He grants the desires of those who fear him. He hears their cries for help and rescues them." That sentiment is repeated in many other places in the Bible. Over and over, we are given the assurance that God hears our prayers, that he is listening. However, life and its trials can often make us wonder. We find ourselves on this seesaw of believing and hoping he's listening, and then feeling despondent when we don't get the answer we were hoping for, or it seems like we aren't getting any answer at all. The next witness on the Witness Podcast found herself searching for answers and often wondering if God was listening. But something inside just wouldn't allow her to give up. No matter what the circumstances of her life looked like, God had given her a hope to cling to, and he gave her the grace and strength to keep believing. She kept praying and searching his word for answers, and he heard every prayer. She learned the meaning of the verse in Galatians 6, verse 9 that says, "And let us not be weary in well-doing, for in due season we shall reap if we faint not." I'm very excited to call this next witness. She is someone I love very much, and you have been waiting to hear from her since episode 1. So, ladies and gentlemen, I call to the stand my wife, Amy Trader.
Will you tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Well, everybody, we're here with my wife, Amy Trader. If you remember back in episode 1, I promised you that at some point I would have Amy come on and we would talk about our story. And that was 16 episodes ago, and we finally are making it happen. However, on this episode, we're going to talk more about Amy's story and her testimony. I feel like it's more important that you get to know her first, and then we'll probably dedicate even another episode to our story, like the story after we met and got married. So today we're just going to share Amy's testimony. And so Amy, welcome to the witness stand, and thank you for coming on and being a part of this.
You're very welcome.
All right. So hopefully we're not starting off too awkward, but usually I just start from the beginning with the witnesses that come on. We just start from the beginning. So go ahead and tell us where you're from, where you were born, and how you grew up.
Well, I was born in Westchester, Pennsylvania. My story starts off a little rocky. Even then, my parents were, there's a really large age gap between them. And my mom was 19 and my dad was about 37 or so. And she was his fourth wife. He had quite a history before her. And
He was 37?
35, 36, 37, something like that.
I don't think I realized that.
Yeah. And he had been in the Navy. He already lived a pretty full life before they met. And my mom was, like I said, 19, and they were both in a pretty rough place in life, a lot of partying and drugs and alcohol from what I've been told. And
what your dad was sort of a child of the whole 60s thing, right?
yeah, definitely. He was very much, at that point, looked like a hippie and a biker. He was not as laid back and full of love and acceptance, I don't think. But yeah, he had hair to his waist, tattoos everywhere. My mom was very much a flower child hippie, very naive and sweet. And yeah, so they got married.
She's still sweet,
She is sweet.
but maybe not as naive.
No. Yeah, so they, it was actually a pretty abusive relationship. Not hard to believe with those dynamics, but they ended up separating and divorcing when I was 6 months old. My mom and I moved back to where she was from, Wisconsin, and over a matter of months or a year or so, they both found God in their own ways and got back together and got remarried when I was 2. So, and after that, had 4 more kids. So it was, yeah.
5.
5 more kids, yeah. Yeah.
So you were 6 months old. How old were you when they got remarried?
2.
2.
So they were apart for about a year and a half.
And your mom moved to Wisconsin in that
We
interim
moved to
period?
Wisconsin yes. And then once they got back together, we moved back to Pennsylvania.
Do you know the story of why they got back together or how they got back together?
They just kept, from what I know, they just kept in touch, and both of them.
I guess there was you kind of still
Yeah.
keeping them together in a sense.
Yeah, and they both. I don't know the full story on how they both ended up finding God, but they did, and they both felt like it was God's will for them to get back together, and especially for my sake. And so they did, and found a church that they really were rooted in for a long time. We went there up until I was about 10-ish, I think. So that was the church that I grew up in.
Back to Pennsylvania?
In Pennsylvania, yeah.
And what kind of church was that?
It was an independent fundamental Baptist church. So I would say the best comparison would be what you think of when you hear about, when you think of the Duggars, what is it? They were one of the organizations that they're a part of, but our church would have been more strict and conservative than the Duggars church. So.
And you went there till you were 10?
Yeah.
So do you remember growing up in that atmosphere? Like how much of your early years do you remember?
A lot. It was very, very formative for me. It was definitely the foundation of my relationship with God and my knowledge of the Bible and how to study the Bible and Christian character. Just anything that you can think of. That is where my foundation really was. I remember I was 4 years old, I think, and hearing my pastor preach about going to heaven and salvation. And I remember just understanding it really clearly that even at such a young age that Jesus came to die for our sins, for us to go to heaven because he loves us and wants us to be with him. And I remember drawing a picture of like the 3 crosses on a hill and listening to this message. And my parents looked over at me and realized that I was kind of grasping the message. And at the end of every service, there would be an altar call. Not that we would go to the altar, but it was more like offering you a time to pray and kind of deal with whatever it is that you're dealing with God, between yourself and God. And our pastor would always lead the prayer of salvation. Like if anybody wants to give their life to Christ, these are the words that you say. This is the prayer that you pray, and Jesus will come. Invite Jesus to come into your heart, and you'll be saved. And my dad, I believe my dad prayed with me after the service during that time, and it was a huge deal. My parents were very excited for me, and at the next opportunity for me to be baptized, I was baptized in front of the church. We had a baptismal behind the altar, and there was a service where anybody who wanted to be baptized would they would have everybody in their gowns and everything ready to go in the back, and then you'd come out into the front and give a testimony, and then the pastor would baptize us. And I did that when I was about 5 or 6.
Wow. Cool. So what was your what was your life like as a 5, 6, 7 in those days?
I remember it being pretty, I don't know, I guess really conflicted is the best way to describe it. I went to the Christian school that was a part of our church, and I really liked it, and I felt like I thrived there and I was doing really well. But my home life had already started to, I don't know from my mom's perspective if it was ever really what she thought it was going to be when they got back together, but I definitely was afraid of my dad. It was a very abusive household. He was very controlling and manipulative and extremely strict, and I just, lived in fear pretty much all the time.
Was it physically abusive?
I would say so, yeah. I would say that he was abusive in every way, really. It wasn't to the point of like beatings, but it was definitely like slapping, spanking unnecessarily, like certainly things that I would never do to my own kids. And he was just very scary. To the point that when I was 8, I remember one day, I think my parents were cleaning out the garage and I was in the house by myself. And I just was sitting there in the living room crying and trying to think of how I can get out of this house. And I started to write the little, I'm running away, blah, 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 a letter that I think a lot of kids do, whether it's valid or not. But I just remember really like having that realization of like, this is not good. This is not normal. This is not what it's supposed to be like. And I just didn't want to be there anymore.
At 8?
At 8.
So what was it about your dad that was scary?
Well, he's very tall, very dark hair, dark eyes, just very demanding, commanding, harsh, just, it could just made you feel like you could never do anything right, ever. He would just quit his job one day and with no plan, no backup plan for anything. And we would just be, he would just be home and angry, and, we would have no grocery money. We would have no, not sure how much longer we're going to be able to stay in our house. And then, he would turn around and buy a new TV and sign up for cable in the 80s, which was expensive. And, just a lot of like very confusing, very, schizophrenic kind of behavior. And actually, eventually, years later, a marriage counselor would tell my mom that she did believe he was borderline schizophrenic. So it was just a feeling of never being safe or settled and never knowing what was coming next and not being allowed to say anything about it and just having to go with the flow.
So a massive amount of instability.
Constant instability in every way. You never knew what his reactions were going to be like. You never knew what was going to happen. And you weren't ever allowed to say anything about it, good or bad.
But all through this time, you guys are still going to church and you're
Yes.
still involved with church?
Extremely involved. He was in the School of Theology for a long time, studying to become a pastor. And he also worked as a janitor there for a long time too, to help with my tuition. And yeah, I mean, it was just, yeah.
And so that was, you said you went to that church until you were 10. So then what happened?
So he, well, to back up a little bit, when I went to that school up until third grade, and when I was in fourth grade, it seemed that was when things really started to unravel
At home?
At home, and I believe that was around the time that he ended up overhearing something at. Overhearing some people talk about him, I think, and people that were in leadership at our church. And it was really devastating for him. He quit the School of Theology, and I believe we still went to church. But that was a real breaking point for him personally. And their marriage started to really go downhill more. And around that time, my cousin had moved in nearby. All through this time, my grandmother lived a couple of houses away. And so I was visiting my cousin more. She was at our house more. For some reason, my dad hated her. I don't know why.
Hated your cousin?
Yes.
How old was she?
A year older than me. And that was really devastating to her and I for sure. We've talked about it a few times. Around that time, a situation happened with my uncle who was living in that house as well, and me and one of my siblings, and a sexual abuse situation, and that was just the last straw. We ended up moving about an hour away.
Hold on. Your uncle lived in your house?
No, in my grandmother's house.
A few doors down.
A few doors down. So it was my grandmother and two of her sons, both my uncles. One of the sons was the father of my cousin, and the other uncle was the one that it happened with. So, so we moved, stopped going to the church. We were essentially homeless for about a year between staying in our camper and staying with a friend until we found a house and my dad got another job, and then things leveled out a lot and got a lot better.
So, up to that point, when you lived close to your grandmother, where did you guys? Where was that? The town that you lived in.
That was Exton, Pennsylvania.
And so then, when you moved away,
we moved to Oxford,
Pennsylvania.
Yeah. So things became a little better in some ways. It was still, my parents' marriage was still like rapidly devolving. But we were homeschooled at that point, and we found a big homeschool group where my mom finally had some really good friends. We had really good friends. We had a huge support system at that point. And when I was 14, they finally separated.
So your about 11 years old when you guys start homeschooling.
Yeah.
So all through this time period, like, what's happening with you? I mean, you explained when you were 8 how you were feeling. How are you processing all of this stuff?
I would say I wasn't. I was just very disconnected from myself and my feelings, in just total survival mode. I developed an eating disorder, and
At what age?
12-ish, 12, 13, 14. And I was very, very, very thin, and actually reached out for help at one point and was not believed.
Why do you think you developed an eating disorder?
I think it was just a subconscious way of controlling something in my life. I knew I couldn't control anything at all in my entire life. I couldn't control I was not in charge of my words, my responses, I just felt like a robot out of fear of, punishment or more like verbal abuse from my dad. And, I just had nothing for myself at all. And I actually consciously remember thinking, well, this is something that I can do that they won't know about, and they won't be able to say anything about. And I would like make goals of how much weight am I going to try to lose this week or this month or whatever. And I was down to like 89 pounds, which for 5'5", that was just ridiculously thin.
Did anybody notice?
My dad would make jokes, like in an affectionate way, even though that sounds strange. He would say like, "Oh, make sure you finish your dinner. We don't need another Karen Carpenter." And yeah, but that was
Did you know what that meant?
Yeah, but that was his way of being affectionate. And I, in a sick way, I was like, wow, he is noticing. Okay. But then no, that was the end of it.
So it kind of made you feel good that he noticed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. What's happening with God? I mean, you know, it seems like when you were young, you started off having this feeling towards God. You knew who he was. You seem to have a connection. Is that still carrying through, or are you feeling like abandoned by him? Or
I think that I was still shut down, so shut down and just in total survival mode. But I remember having so many different times where I just would have this like kind of miraculous, I'll say miraculous because I don't know where it came from, this hope or this belief that it's not always going to be this way. And there were so many times when there was like so much dysfunction and things going on around me, and it was almost like God was whispering in my ear, like, this isn't how it's supposed to be. This isn't a loving father. This isn't a healthy family. And it's not always going to be like this. And that was what I think just drove me for so many years, because to find God and to find like health, emotional health, and, you know, whatever you want to say, because I knew that this isn't all there is. And I was seeing other friends or people that I knew that were just settling for their circumstances and perpetuating, you know, patterns. And, you know, and I just was like, how can you not know? This isn't what it's supposed to be like. Like, we need to do better than this. We need to find more. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it was just a very vague, like, sense of keep going. This isn't what it's supposed to be like. You don't have to settle for this. This isn't, you know, there's more to this. And well, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but so I was pretty emotionally shut down until my dad left. And I was about 14, and one of my mom's good friends really took me under her wing and started just having me over to her house for a sleepover. She had older teenage daughters. And she would take me shopping, which I'd never done before, for clothes. And she was really sweet and funny. Her name was Vivian. And we would always do some kind of Bible study, or there was a book that came out around that time that was really popular called The Wounded Heart. And I think it was one of the first of its kind to talk about like emotional healing and where is God in all of these circumstances, and like how to rebuild build a relationship with God after abuse. And she would kind of walk me we would read it together, and I don't think I ever cried or ever had any kind of like visible response, but it was getting through. And I did not realize how shut down I really was until one time we were praying together or whatever, and she just gave me a hug, and which I was not comfortable with because I was not used to it. And she just held me for a long time, and she was like, I know it hurts. I know it hurts. And I thought, oh my gosh, I don't feel anything. It doesn't even hurt yet. I wasn't even in pain yet. I was so shut down. And
you were 14?
Yeah. And I realized like, wow, I really have a long way to go. But it was encouraging because it felt like I was taking steps, even if I didn't feel like things were changing. And
so you had just buried all of it?
Yeah, completely buried all of it. Definitely.
So you were aware that it wasn't like your life wasn't right. You were aware that things weren't right.
Yeah.
And you were aware that you were being hurt, but you didn't really allow yourself to feel the hurt?
I think it was just, it had been going on for such a long time that it was completely out, like, what's the word I'm thinking of? It was involuntary. I didn't choose not to feel hurt. It just was like, you know, the wound had just healed over with scar tissue or whatever. But everything was still under the surface.
I guess maybe, you could compare it to like in a physical pain situation, your body goes into shock.
Yeah.
And which makes you feel sort of, more or less numb to the pain that you should be feeling.
I think so, yeah, because the more aware the older I got, the more aware I was of, other people, the world around me, whatever, other families, the more it was just like, I can't believe I have to live with this. And I don't know if that's normal for a lot of abuse victims or survivors or whatever. But it's what worked for me. It's what happened to me. I knew that it wasn't. I knew that it wasn't right. I knew, and I could even like differentiate between what I knew of the Bible, what the Bible would say about God, and compare that. And love is patient, love is kind, love is whatever. And I knew that this isn't what I was experiencing. This is not. My dad was not acting in a godly way. My family, this isn't, there's a huge divide here.
And you guys stopped going to church around the time you were about 11. Did you start going to church anywhere else?
Yeah, we went to a different Baptist church in Oxford, but just for a variety of reasons, we just didn't really connect. And especially once my parents separated, my mom wanted to go to a church that one of her closest friends was going to. It was a non-denominational church that was a branch a daughter work of a Mennonite church. And that is where we went from the time I was like 13, 14 until I graduated high school. And that was a wonderful place for us. It was a really, really good church.
Now, do you remember having any, can you think back on your life, in this time frame? I mean, because it sounds like you really had a close connection with God, particularly when you were really young. And it sounds like you were always somewhat involved in scriptures and learning about God and Christianity. Can you think of any moment where you really had like a spiritual experience that that it was God and he was in your life and his hand was on you?
Yeah, I think that started, so around that same time, a while, probably after I was getting together with Vivian. We had moved away a little bit more, and I think this was really not right after my parents separated. I remember I went up into I was just a disaster. I was so emotional. I was so angry.
What were you angry about?
I didn't know. I was just so angry.
Is this right after your father left?
This would have been right after. Yeah. I think I was just angry that at everything that had happened to me in my life up to that point. And my mom had the day after my dad left, I think she said she must have just had a nervous breakdown. She spent over a week in bed, and she was like unreachable, basically. My siblings were all over the place. My brothers were horrible to deal with. And so I think this was after my mom started coming around and feeling this incident that I'm going to talk about, after she started feeling a little better. And I went into her room, and I was just like an emotional basket case. And she was like, what is going on? What's wrong? What's wrong? And I couldn't name it, and I couldn't say anything. And I think I stormed off, and then I came back, and she was still in her room, and she just sat down, and I sat in a chair at her desk, and I felt like something spoke to me, like, this is your opportunity to either start really doing this digging work and healing and choosing God. And it was a conscious thought, like choosing healing, choosing to try to develop a relationship with God and get closer to him, or just kind of take the easier route and just keep it buried and just live my life however I wanted to. And so I sat down, and she had never been available for me before, because she had 6 kids and a narcissistic abusive husband, and she was a stay-at-home mom with no income and whatever. And she had just never really been available for me very much. But this situation, she really wanted to hear from me. And so I sat down, and it took me a long time to finally start to open up a little bit. And it was a lot of her just waiting for me to be able to talk. And so we started talking, and that was the beginning of me actively like searching for healing and learning how to open up and trust and try to connect with God or feel God and trust him with my hurts and all of, everything. And so from that time on, I would, it was bad. I was definitely, I had a couple moments of, completely suicidal, down in my room with a knife, asking God to make sure that I didn't do anything. But I started to open my Bible and ask him to prove himself. I was raised to believe the Bible, and I did. And I was raised to believe that God cannot lie. And so I would dig into all of these verses, all of these different passages, especially like in the Psalms. And I don't know, I was stuck in Psalms and Isaiah for a really, really, really long time. And just say, God, I believe that you're no respecter of persons. If you can deliver David in this way, I believe that you're going to, you can do the same for me. And then, I came across the verse where the guy says, I believe, help thou my unbelief. And that was always followed after everything I would pray, because I knew that I still had unbelief. I knew that I still, I wasn't 1,000% trusting, but in my logical mind, I believed enough to, even if I didn't feel it. So I would come home from a really bad day at school, and I would just, cry or whatever, and read my Bible until I felt God. And then I would keep reading. I wouldn't just stop, but I would just read and just pray, like, okay, where are you? What is it that you want me to read? What is the word that you have for me? And it was always something encouraging or something that I needed to hear. I would just flip through and not just, mindlessly, but like just try to, listen, like, where do you want me to, where did I feel like I needed to read? And that was I would say that time was the foundation for my personal relationship with God, because I was learning. I had a lot of biblical knowledge, but I was learning to feel after him and hear from him. And it got me through those years in a public high school with a family that was still struggling really bad and falling apart. Once my dad left, he pretty much didn't want anything to do with me after that. And us girls, or at least me and two of my sisters, we could go over and see him sometimes, but he just pretty much lost it. He didn't really,
Did your mom have all the kids?
She did at first, but not long after, my brother John moved in with him. And then a little while later, my brother Ben moved in with him. And so it was mostly just us girls at home.
It's I'm just going to take a little side trip talking about the way you turned to scripture. It's in a sense, what I hear is there is a blessing in that experience, because for a lot of people, the Bible is just something that goes along with Christianity, and we open it up for our morning devotions and we memorize some verses and we go about our day. But it's, when it becomes a lifeline, when you're searching the Bible for hope, it becomes a lot more alive. I mean, it sounds to me like the Bible is what got you through some of those moments.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, it was my absolute lifeline. It was all I had. And at that point, I didn't even really have strong Christian friends, or I had a youth group, but I wasn't really connected. I did have another mentor at that point, but she lived kind of far, and it was kind of hard to get together. But she also always pointed me back to the Bible, and when we would get together, we would do just, I guess, kind of counseling. But she definitely always pointed me back to the Bible. It was my lifeline. I was not a perfect person, but I don't know. I don't want to say the wrong thing.
Well, we can always cut things out.
I made it through, in a situation where many other people would have, her husband at one point was like, talking about me and my sister. He was like, you girls could be pregnant. You could be on drugs. You could be partying. You could be doing all these different things, and statistically should be, based on how, our life situation at the time and what things were. And I can honestly say that I made it through high school without doing anything like that at all. So,
yeah,
I feel
that's
blessed.
that's the road a lot of people take to escape all that pain, as they choose to wash it away with drugs and alcohol and that whole lifestyle. So seems like you had a good amount of grace from God.
Definitely.
Somewhere along the way, in your younger years, that foundation must have really found its way to the top.
Yeah. And I don't say that at all to brag or anything like that. I say it to illustrate the fact that God was reaching for me way harder than I was reaching for him. And he did just give me the grace to connect with him and stay under that shadow of his wing at a time when it would have been easy to not do that.
That's one of my favorite scriptural illustrations of God is hiding under the shadow of his wing. I love thinking about that. Mm-hmm. So you're 14 at this point,
that was pretty much how all my high school years were. Yeah.
So, and you're going to this Mennonite offshoot church.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So keep going. What happened next? So your dad is gone now. He leaves when you're 14.
Yeah.
You had this moment with your mom where you just kind of pour things out, and you're reaching into the Bible for hope and to move you through life. So yeah, how did that progress? You're a teenager, you're dealing with high school.
Yeah, I just kind of coasted through high school. It wasn't terrible. It wasn't great. I just was really connected with my church. I helped lead worship with the friend of mine who's my mentor at that time, with her husband. She didn't sing. She would sing sometimes if he asked her to, but he played the guitar and he sang. And so it was usually like me and him and a couple other people. Just that's basically it. I had decided to go to a missions training school when I graduated. And so for my last couple years of high school, I was kind of focusing on that, where to go. I was praying about where to apply to, because there are branches all over the world. And I really felt to go to the one there was one in Arkansas, outside, in a tiny little town outside Fayetteville. And so I did that. I graduated high school and we went down to, my family dropped me off and I was there for 6 months.
In Arkansas,
In
for 6
Arkansas.
months?
And I went to our missions trip was in Honduras, and so I spent 6 weeks in Honduras and loved it. And it was a really, really great experience altogether. Really super furthered my relationship with God and my closeness with Him. I felt like I was just a sponge, and I would just read all of these different books in their library, spiritual books. We had a lot of Bible memorization. It was called a discipleship training school, and the teachers were just phenomenal. It was just about Christian life, and it was really, really great. And so, yeah, I did that. And
you had some powerful spiritual experiences in that?
oh yeah, I did. I met, yeah. One of the one of the most difficult things was we a smaller group of our group was going to hike up this mountain and go to this little town where no white people had been there for 10 years. And we were going to stay in this little church, and our leader was, I think we had like nightly services or a couple services in the evenings while we were there. I can't remember exactly. And yeah, just a time of ministry with some translators or interpreters. And so we got to this, the bottom of this mountain, and already like me and another girl were having a hard time breathing because the elevation was so high, and we actually didn't really get along. We ended up like keeping pace, like so far behind everybody else. She and I, like, because we had asthma and we couldn't breathe climbing up this mountain. And we both just kind of prayed the entire time. And it was so fun. We like looked at each other and laughed at one point because we knew that we didn't really like each other. And, you know, here we were stuck, and we were like, yeah, this is, you know, kind of typical kind of thing. But throughout my whole time in YWAM, it's Youth with a Mission, I would have these times, and I think we had a teaching, one of our instructors would say, like, if as an exercise to help us at that point grow closer to God, to learn to trust that He hears us and He cares about our little needs and our needs, big and small. He would just encouraged us to just pray, God, I would really like this, or please help me with that, or whatever, and then wait for that answer to prayer. And I had started doing that. And so that's, so to get back to that hike, this girl and I were talking, and, you know, we're so far behind everybody, struggling to hike up this mountain that's like a mile straight up. And one of us said, and it might have been me, I think it was, I said, you know, God, and I think I said it out loud to this girl, like, I would just love it if we get up to the top of this mountain in the middle of nowhere in Honduras, where there's like no civilization whatsoever. They haven't even seen white people for 10 years. Like, I would just love to get up there and to have a Coke. And she was like, yeah, that would be so great. Oh my gosh, wouldn't it be so great? And so we were kind of laughing, like, yeah, okay. Not that God can't do it, but it just felt like a silly prayer. Like, okay. So we get up there to this little church, and this man came out. And I mean, these are like dirt floors. We had passed like a sugarcane processing, like homemade, rugged, ancient, falling apart sugar, where they would make their sugarcane so that they would have sugar. And, you know, there's coffee plants everywhere. Like, they are not going to the store. Like, these people are growing everything that they have. So anyway, we get up there and this guy comes out of the church and he's like, hello, or whatever, hola, whatever. And he's holding a case of Cokes
Oh my gosh.
in these glass bottles. And Risha and I like looked at each other like, I think we just laughed so hard we were crying because we were so exhausted and we like nearly died on this
That's
trip.
amazing.
And that was, we were like, okay, this, you know, God he really, really cares about these little things, because that is like, never in a million years did we expect that to happen.
That's amazing,
Yeah.
man.
So I did have during that time a lot of little instances like that. Maybe not some quite as like dramatic as that, but I definitely came away from that whole experience like trusting that God was in the details and he
heard you
and heard me every time which I needed, because I could look back at my whole childhood and all of these different times when, you know, I was being hurt or taken advantage of, and adults that were there, supposed to be there to protect me, just didn't. Or they were the ones that were, you know, hurting me, people who I was supposed to trust. And to know that, you know, and then to turn around and see that God loved me enough to have some Cokes in the mountains of Honduras.
I'm trying to, this is an amazing thing for me. I'm trying to approach this interview as if I don't know you. You know, the way I would talk to anybody. However, I do know you, and I know how important it is to you to feel like you're being heard.
Yeah.
And I know that that's been a struggle for a large part of your life, is that you never felt heard. So the idea that God was showing you that in that way, something that to us is so silly, but to him, it's his way of saying, yeah, I hear you. I hear it all, you know?
Yeah.
It's really amazing that he does things like that.
Yeah. I would say not to disagree with you or anything, but, and it's probably equal, but I feel like, I mean, it definitely goes hand in hand, but I would say I never felt seen. And I think it's not just because just being heard, you can be heard and ignored, or heard and misunderstood. And which is very much my, you know, had been my experience growing up. But, and too, with my dad, a lot of things were always twisted. And so I would say one thing and he would hear disrespect or disobedience or what he would call pride or whatever it was. And I never felt that my true intentions or my true heart was, you know, I didn't feel like I was being seen for who I am or what I, you know, what I was actually saying, or because I felt like just constantly misunderstood and misinterpreted. So,
do you feel like your relationship with your father had any bearing on your relationship with God? Do you feel like you looked at, I mean, a lot of people talk about how having such a terrible relationship with their father can carry over to their relationship with God, and they wind up not being able to really process a good relationship with God. Do you feel like that was the case for you?
I definitely think it did, more than I thought it did, but not as much as it could have. I think there was enough once I really started seeking after God when I was a teenager. I really tried to separate that out and memorize verses about who God is and try to learn who God is. And when I would feel myself feeling afraid that God was going to be angry with me or disappointed in me or something, I could easily go back and say, like, no, that's, you know, I could differentiate it, or yeah, I could, I lost my words. I could separate those things is what I'm saying. Yeah.
That's good.
But it still, it still took a long time to really feel like where I am today, where I don't really feel like he influences it at all. It was definitely into adulthood before I felt like I could really, that part had really just died away.
Now, do you, so it's just you and your mom going through life, you, your mom, and then your siblings, and you're the oldest.
Yeah.
And so it's just you guys, and then you go off to Arkansas for 6 months, and then you go to Honduras for 6 weeks, and then you come home after that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what was that like?
I felt really lost. I wanted to go back for the second program, but it just wasn't financially feasible. I think we could have made it happen, but I don't know. It just didn't feel right. I wanted to work as a summer camp counselor at a camp in Quarryville. And if I had done that second program, I wouldn't have been able to do that. And that missions trip with the second program was always at one specific country that I just did not really want to go to. I just didn't feel called there. So I decided to come home and work for a while, and then work at BlackRock in the summer. And so I did that, and I just, the time between, so I would have come home in January of 2000, and then I was home, and then camp would have started in June, and I was just really lost. I was very, very, very lost. I definitely started to feel depressed because I had had this wonderful experience and had all this independence, and I was coming home to, the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, and my friends were either back at their homes or they were in the second program, and it was definitely a time of a little bit of spiritual struggle because I just didn't know what to do next, and I felt like I had really outgrown everything, my life in Pennsylvania at that point. So summer was really, really fun. It was a really good experience. And then in the fall, I started to nanny for 2 families that I had known for a really long time. And eventually I moved out and got an apartment and continued to nanny. And I wasn't super consistent with church because our church was kind of going through a transition, and I was going to a couple different churches, a couple different places, just kind of inconsistently. But I was really, really searching. Nothing felt right. Everything felt just very shallow. And I just, I was just kind of lost. I just didn't know what to do, what I wanted. I dated somebody at that point, and that was not great. It didn't end well because I found out that his family did not like me at all because my parents were divorced, and I wasn't good enough for him.
Can you talk a little bit about that, about the like old school Mennonite atmosphere? I mean, because you grew up around it.
Yeah.
You grew up in it, and you were affected by it. And I think even one of your sisters was somewhat affected by that whole sort of culture.
Yeah. So we did not live in Lancaster County, but we lived nearby. And the church that I was going to, was from a Mennonite church, a branch of a Mennonite church that was non-denominational. It was like a neighborhood outreach kind of thing. So it was not as strict or maybe as conservative as other Mennonite churches were, but my youth group was in a Mennonite church, and I would definitely say that my experience was way more positive than negative. I learned so much about hospitality and generosity and service, and
Which are Mennonite,
like found like pillars.
Yeah, right.
For sure. But and I never had a negative interaction with an adult, but some of the youth group kids for sure just acted a little bit funny because my parent, or I guess I felt less than because my parents were divorced. But I couldn't really ever put my finger, I don't ever remember someone specifically saying anything specific to me. But I might not be remembering clearly, but the one guy I dated, I just felt like his family didn't like me. We had been friends for years and years and dated outside of high school. And something just did not feel right one day. I just was really frustrated. And I come to find out that his family hated me. And it was mainly because my parents were divorced.
So you find out that his family doesn't like you. So, I mean, did you break off the relationship with them?
Yeah. I just broke up with him. I had moved out of my apartment. I was back home. I just felt like I just had this feeling like something, I needed change. I was having these really strange dreams where one dream I had a couple times, this is so weird, but I was having this dream that I was walking around and I was carrying a dead body on my back everywhere I went. And when I woke up, I was like, oh my gosh, I think that was one of the things that made me think like, I really need to change. This relationship is not good. I need to get out of this whole situation that I was in. And I even got one of those little new agey dream interpretation books. And cause I was having all of these like super crazy dreams, and it was all, whatever, say what you will. It's certainly not Bible, but everything was saying like, you need to change, you've got to change. So, I moved home, and, that would have been in May.
Well, before you say that, I feel like I want to make this point, because, we can throw shade on all these new age and all of that, whatever. And, I don't believe in it, but God can speak to us through anything. And I just want to say that. I just want to say that to anybody who's listening. If God is desperate to talk to you, he will find any way he can to talk to you. I feel like that's one of the reasons why in the Bible there's the story of the donkey turning around and talking to that prophet. It's a way of showing us that if God needs to get our attention, he can. So he's given you these dreams, and the best way that you can figure them out is to pick up this book, this dream book, and God's telling you need to change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that would have been just a couple weeks before you and I met. And that was that. But to go back 6 months, one of the biggest things that started this need for change for me was going to your dad's funeral.
That was 6 months?
That would have been 6 months before that. Yeah. So I was really, really in a time of frustration with my church situation and really just seeking for God and praying about what to do. I was looking at different churches in the area and nothing was seeming right. Nothing was feeling right. Everything just still felt really shallow compared to what I had been exposed to. And I remember really like passionately praying a couple times, like after reading the Bible, what started was I started reading, like, what should it be? What should a church be, a New Testament church be like? And I was not seeing what I was reading in any of the churches that I was going to. And so I prayed, a few times, like, God, please, please lead me to a real New Testament church, because I didn't believe that all of the stuff that was in the Bible is not for us anymore. I had been to some conferences and different things where there were gifts of the Spirit in being used. I didn't know if I necessarily believed that it was God, but whatever. I felt like it was out there. I believed it was out there. And so one of the families that I nannied for was he was a World War II reenactor that I had known for a very long time, because to back up, my sister and friend and I a couple of friends and I had been going to these World War II events once a year since I was like 15. And so I'm nannying for one of the guys, his 2 little girls. And he was close friends with Kevin's dad, with your dad. And we had just been to an event a couple months before that, and it was just so much fun. It was just a really, really good time. These guys were all father figures to us. It was very just super wholesome and, really, really great relationships. And they were friends with a bunch of them were friends with my mom from, growing up and everything. So in December, Rick called me. His name was Rick, and he said that Kevin's dad had passed away and asked if we wanted to go down to the funeral. And of course we said yes. And so we came down here, and it was like a 3-hour drive or something, 2.5-hour drive. And it was the strangest thing, because as soon as I walked through the doors, I just felt something that I never really felt before.
At Antioch.
Yes. And Paul, Kevin's brother, came up to me and gave me a hug and said hi to us and everything. And that was kind of funny, because he was always so shy. He was so shy. He could barely talk to us, but he was obviously comfortable in his element. He just came up and gave us hugs and everything. And after I said hi to him, I just sat down in a chair and I was just sobbing. And I was saying in my mind, like, what are you doing? Like, this is so weird, because I didn't know your dad well enough to be crying over him like that. But I was like, this is so weird. And it was just a involuntary, spiritual response. I think it was just, I don't know, God getting my attention or something like that. So we went and sat down, and of course, the first thing that we hear is Mother 8 on the organ. And I think I just sat there with my jaw on the floor the entire time, because something in her voice just resonated with me so, so, so deeply. And it was, the whole service was almost like an out-of-body experience, because I just felt like this is what I've been looking for. And I was saying that to myself, and I felt like God was confirming it in my spirit, this woman with this like, powerful voice, which is not something I had never seen a woman like that, heard a woman like that in person, in a church. And she was so commanding and so passionate and confident. And that was not my experience growing up in the churches that I grew up in. In my Baptist church, women were not even hardly allowed to look the men in the eye, to be honest. In the Mennonite church, they were very meek. And, that was just like one of those like reverberating moments that rippled out into touched the entire way I looked at life and my life and what I was supposed to do and where I was supposed to be and, and who God was and who he created me to be. Because if this woman can be like this, I can stop hiding the strong parts of my personality, because I don't know if that makes like any kind of sense at all. But after being squashed down my whole life, I don't know. It was just like this awakening. And so Bishop Wright, preached the funeral, and of course he talked about Acts 2:38, which I had my Bible with me. I don't even know why I brought my Bible, actually, now that I think about it, but I did, and I underlined it, and I either I brought it with me and I wrote in it then, or I remembered it and I wrote it in at home. I can't remember, but it was written in there, like underlined. And that gave me another jumping off point for reading about this New Testament church and where what it is that what God intends, because that was another piece of it. I knew that these churches, as dead as they felt a lot of times, this is not what God really intended. This is not the depth of what he had for us. And which, not to rabbit trail off this, but one of the another underwriting theme in my life was between like physical provisions or emotional, attention, love, whatever from my parents, it was never enough. And I felt like everything was always going to run out. And I was raised with this like just severe poverty mentality. And that was one of my fears, is just that there will never be enough. And at some point in my childhood, or at some point in my teenage years, I don't remember specifically if it was a verse or if it was just something, I'm just remembering my old Bible. And one of the other things that I had written was that God can never run out, basically. Like there's never an end to him. There's never an end to his love. There's never an end to his provision or his desire for us or his whatever. And that, but I had felt that in all of these other churches that I had been in. I felt like, oh, there's only like a glimpse of, I'm only feeling a glimpse of God, or only feeling a teeny bit of connection. But when I was here for that service, I just felt like this is that like well that never runs dry. Like this is what it's supposed to be like. And so you and I met super briefly, not the right circumstances, and that was fine. And that was when that whole journey, I went home and I started the process of moving out of my apartment, and I broke up with my boyfriend. And the goal for all of that was maybe I could move to Baltimore, because I had a friend that lived down here, and I was thinking, I wonder if I can live with him and go to Antioch and drive down there.
That is an amazing. And, just a reminder, this whole experience has taken place at a funeral.
Yeah. Yes.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. So fast forward again to June, and you and I were at that same World War II event finally like meeting really for the first time. And I don't know, it was kind of it was a similar feeling, like you know, may sound silly, but it was more of like a spiritual, like, wait a minute, there's something here. And I asked all of our mutual friends that were father figures, like, I don't know, what do you think about Kevin? And the toughest one said, yeah, that'd be all right. So I was like, well, if he approves it, then you must be an okay person to be with.
That was Carl?
No, it was Joe.
Joe.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Thanks, Joe.
I know. I went to.
That means a lot.
I don't even know if Carl was there, but I asked everybody, and I was like, if anyone's going to say no, it's going to be Joe. And Joe was like, yeah, that'd be all right. I was like, all right.
Nice.
So then we kind of definitely connected that weekend, and then started just talking, writing letters. People don't even do that anymore.
Yeah. So now, when I met you, I was fresh out of the Air Force. I had separated from the Air Force, been discharged in May of 2001, and then we met a month later. And I was still sort of in my, I mean, you know, I talked in episode 1 about how my father's death and all that had affected me, and I was on the road back, but I definitely was not looking for love. I wasn't looking to be serious about life at that point. I had come home to, I felt like I needed to be home with my mom and my brothers and sisters, but I wasn't really interested in being serious about life. I still felt like I was enjoying the single thing, and I wasn't really, I was on the path to God, but I wasn't really looking to get, I mean, if I'm being honest, I really wasn't looking to get serious with God either. And so I remember when we were walking around that weekend, we were just talking about our goals, or, you know, things that we were thinking about doing in our life. And you had mentioned something, and you said, but I need to pray about that. And I was like, oh, I don't want to get too serious here.
Well, and I think that's why it worked out so well for us, because I really wasn't either. I was fresh out of a relationship that wasn't necessarily serious, but it really, like, kind of was a blow to my self-esteem. And I was still praying about whether or not, like, what is up with this? Do I move to Baltimore? Like, how do I find a church? I didn't think I could find a church like Antioch where I was, but I felt like everything was wide open, and I also was not like, ready to just be serious about anything either. I felt like I was finally, you know, kind of coming into myself in a lot of ways.
What?
And so when we did, I mean, you know, it was very low pressure, and it was just, we just had fun.
No, but the thing about that moment,
Well, I know.
when you said, I need to pray about that.
You knew.
The thing about that moment was I had a feeling like, oh my God, she's the one. Like, I wasn't really planning on finding the one this soon. So then the summer goes on, and you know, we sort of traded off. I would come up to Pennsylvania one weekend, and then you would come to Maryland one weekend. And typically, if I was in Pennsylvania, we didn't always go to church when I would come up to Pennsylvania, but I did go to church with you a few times. But when you came to Maryland, we would always go to church. So what was that like for you, going to services, you know, from that point forward?
Well, it was kind of traumatic in some ways. Actually, I guess not at that point. I shouldn't say that. It was a lot. It was good. I liked it, but it was very, like, it was just so deep spiritually, and I was not used to that at all. And it was what I needed and I knew it, but it just seemed like I think we got into a routine of at some point over that year that we were dating and engaged that there would be we would go to church in the morning. I would cry and receive a lot of ministry, and get a headache and sleep all afternoon while you hung out with your family. And then go to church that night. And then I would either drive home at night or I would spend the night again and go straight to work in Pennsylvania on Monday morning because it was just a really intense time of needing a lot of ministry and healing.
And also, Brother Shelton was coming through quite a bit, right?
Yeah, I think so.
And he was doing a lot of that sort of deep ministry.
Yeah.
And called you out more than once.
Goodness. Between Bishop Wright and Brother Shelton, I was called out almost every single service. And it was much needed and much appreciated, but yeah, it was much needed.
And I mean, I wasn't much help because I was still in the throes of my, for one thing, I was dealing with the loss of my father and trying to still process that and understand who I was and still, I'm just a fun time kind of guy. And so I was still dealing with that also, like trying to grow up in a sense.
Yeah.
So it was a whirlwind.
Yeah, it was.
And so what's happening with you in your, regular life in Pennsylvania at this time?
I'm just working and just focused on dating and I don't know, waiting to see what happens, I guess.
Yeah, because I don't think we really knew. I mean, I said I knew at that moment, but we were still kind of. I don't think it was until, I guess, by the end of the summer we were pretty serious.
Probably. I mean, I don't think we considered ourselves serious until I got the Holy Ghost, though, because we were just really just kind of taking it slow.
So I wanna get into that, but I did kind of want to talk about one other thing here. Throughout your life, you had a bad experience with one of your uncles, and then you had the whole experience with your father. Did you have any positive male role models that you feel like helped? Did you have any male voice in your life that you relied on?
No. No. Not until I really, we started going to the reenactments, but even then that was just like once a year.
Did you feel that void? Like, did you feel like were you aware that you needed something like that or?
Yeah. Even up until a couple of years ago, I was still grieving not having a dad. I never as a child, not really as a teenager. I've had a couple people sort of since then, but I've never had a dad ever. And I'm 44 and it is truly something I've grieved up until about a couple of years ago. Definitely.
So now we're moving into September, and what I remember from my experience is by the time we hit September, we were pretty serious. You had been coming to services at Antioch fairly regularly at this point.
Yeah, I think for a couple weeks. I don't think we started seeing each other frequently until like end of July, August.
Yeah, that's probably true. And then September 11th happens.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a turning point moment for me. We're going to take a little break. We're back. Okay, so I was saying that September 11th was a turning point for me in the way I was approaching my life, I guess. But this is your testimony. So what were you thinking about? I mean, like I was saying, like you've been coming to Antioch, continually experiencing that, that move of God. So what's happening with you?
Well, I have always been a chronic overthinker. And I think during this time of my life, God just like did a miracle in my mind and gave me a ton of grace to not overthink everything and to not overanalyze. And for the first time really in my life, I just felt like the entire time we were dating, I was just trusting that he would guide us, me especially, into what needed to happen next. And I was just along for the ride. I wasn't really stressing about anything. I didn't want to dig too deeply into what I was feeling and freak myself out. And so I would just kind of like do a lot of the spiritual work on the weekends when I was at church, and just kind of let it settle throughout the week. Still praying and, reading my Bible, but not like studying too hard and overthinking and ruminating in a way that would be, that would kind of ruin things.
But I do remember, some things at Antioch, you trying to make sense of certain things, the way of certain things being done at Antioch, and you trying to make sense of those things and trying to like reconcile some of the things that Antioch believed in. You were trying to reconcile that with things that you believed in, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
What was that? I mean,
I don't feel like I feel like there was a lot of stuff that I either struggled to understand or kind of struggled with a little bit, but ultimately there was a lot of things that I just trusted I had to let go of and just trust that God would reveal it to me when I needed to understand it. Or there was just so many moving pieces to, I think there were things that were like, I had to sort by importance. And because I am super emotional and super sensitive, I would just kind of, I don't know, I'm also really good at compartmentalizing. So what was true to me at that point and what was important to me at that point was God was doing a lot of healing in me that I needed. And I trusted Bishop and Mother Wright. And God had spoken to me so much through Bishop Wright, confirming things or saying things that through him that no one could have ever known were things that I needed to hear, or things that I had prayed about, or that I'd wrestled with, or whatever. And those little things happened so consistently that other things just weren't as important, because I knew that this is God. This is where, it might not all make sense. It might not all look familiar. It might not all feel familiar, but I know God, and I know that this is the clearest I've ever heard him or felt him. And that's what's important right now. And that's why I didn't think too much like about our relationship or about maybe some doctrinal differences. I also knew, God's ways, his ways are not our ways. And there are things that are too hard for us to understand and about him. And I just trusted that, when I needed to understand something, I would. And I think about I was super into World War II history and especially the Holocaust. And I loved Corrie ten Boom. And I just would think about the story that she told about, she had heard something in school one day that she didn't understand. And I think it was something inappropriate that she heard someone say. And she tells the story of she was standing on, waiting to get on a train with her dad. And her dad was carrying a suitcase. And she said, "Dad, what does this mean?" And he set the suitcase down and he said, "Here, pick this up." And she tried and she couldn't because it was too heavy. And she's like, I can't lift it. It's too heavy. And he said, "Well, it's the same thing as, that's the same thing as this term or whatever it was that you're asking me about. It's too heavy for you to carry right now. You won't understand it."
Oh, that's amazing.
When you're old, when you're big enough, when you're strong enough, then you'll be able to handle that information basically. And so I would think about things like that a lot. Wow. And I would, and I knew at night, how old was I? 20-ish. There was so much that I didn't understand. And there was, I had seen enough of the world at that point to know that I'm not going to understand everything. So I just, there was things that would stress me out or concern me in the moment, or that I didn't understand, or that people were telling me were wrong or whatever. And I just was like, okay, but this is what I know is right. And this is the only thing that I need to be concerned with right now.
So what I hear you saying is you knew you were where God wanted you to be.
Yeah.
You couldn't make sense with all of it, but because you knew that you were in the right place, you figured it would all work itself out.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. So just to progress the story, I keep saying September 11th happened, and that was a pivotal moment for me. And because I felt like I wanted to react to that somehow, I had just gotten out of the Air Force, and I had seen other people getting called back into duty, and I was hoping that was going to happen for me, but it didn't. But I wanted to somehow be involved in that. I remember you and me one time, like soon after, maybe the following weekend, we were walking around downtown Annapolis, and I was expressing that to you, and you said, well, maybe you should just, before you do anything, maybe you should have a meeting with Brother Wright and see what he says. So that's what I wound up doing. And I guess I probably had the opportunity to meet with him sometime in October. Just trying to think of our timeline.
Yeah,
it had to have been
like the first week of October or something.
Right. So I sat down with him and I talked to him about, wanting to react to September 11th somehow. And the way Brother Wright always is, you come to a meeting with him thinking you're going to talk about one thing, and it winds up being about something completely different. But at the end of the meeting, he asked me about you, and he asked me about your history and where you were from and what you were about, and your church background, and he asked me if you'd have been baptized and filled with the Holy Ghost, or if we'd ever even talked about it. And I said, we're fairly serious, but I'm not really sure where it's going. I said, so we haven't really talked deeply about that. And I said, and honestly, I'm not all that worried about it. I said, if it's God's will, I know he'll take care of it. And so that very next Sunday, I'll let you take it from there. This is literally the Sunday following that meeting, because I want you to sort of explain what was going on with you in the church service.
Well, I don't really remember. I don't remember what he was preaching or anything, but I mean, I remember what happened, but I don't remember specifically what I was feeling. But I just know as soon as he started preaching, I just started crying, and that was not normal. I did cry usually like at the altar, but afterwards, but I just was crying, and I don't remember what exactly he was saying, but I just couldn't stop. And I mean, I don't think he spoke for very long, and he eventually just said something like, I know when I'm getting in the way.
Yeah, I mean, he stopped the service.
He stopped the service, and he said that, and he was like, "Sister, come on up." And I went up, and they prayed for me, and I feel like I had a hard time getting the Holy Ghost. I think it was just a lot of shame, honestly, and not personal shame. I think the shame for things that I have done. I think the shame that I have struggled with and still struggle with sometimes is more of just like, I don't know, like just from my childhood, just, not shame as in I've done these terrible things and I can't be forgiven, but just more like I'm just not good enough. I'm not worthy. I'm not, just the mindset that was deeply ingrained from my childhood. And I remembered even hearing like, this isn't going to work for you. It's not, because that was just I don't know. I just felt like I was hearing voices, all these, different messages that I think I had received as a child. And I feel like I had a really hard time, but I did eventually start speaking in tongues, and I did not feel better. I feel like it lifted the lid on maybe that final like barrier to really being able to be opened up and healed. And
oh, that's interesting.
It was not joyful, and I don't know. I mean, it was always positive. Every experience like that has always been positive, and I've always felt better afterwards. But I just, I think that just the hurt and the shame and the whatever else that had just been buried for my entire life. I mean, I remember, as of a few years ago, just God showing, revealing things to me that happened to me when I was a baby and a toddler. And I think that just subconsciously, there was just so much in me that was just trying to get out. And so anyway, I did get the Holy Ghost. And then later that night, we both got baptized.
Yeah.
And I did feel a lot better after I was baptized. And right after, you can tell, but say what you're going to say. But right after that, and coming out of the baptismal area, people started hugging me and saying "Welcome to the family," and asking Kevin when we were going to get engaged. And that wasn't even really on the table at that point. But yeah.
So, why did you get baptized? You had been baptized when you were...
I'd been baptized as a baby and as a child. And yeah, well, so I think, who was it that I talked to? Somebody said that I needed to be baptized in Jesus' name. And I saw the verse, and that was good enough for me. At that point, I was very serious about doing whatever, obeying God and doing whatever he wanted me to do. And it was just clear. It was clear to me that I needed to be baptized in Jesus' name. So it was not an issue.
Awesome. So yeah, that was it. I mean, once I came out of the water, I knew we were getting that. I knew that was, the rest of our story was written pretty much in that we were getting married.
Did you explain why you got baptized again?
Well, I mentioned that in episode 1, okay. But I mean, more or less, Bishop Wright came to me, I think that morning after you had gotten the Holy Ghost, and, talked about you being baptized. And then he said, I don't typically recommend this, but, I think because I was baptized when I was I think I was either 10 or 12 when I got baptized the first time at Antioch, but he felt like maybe I had been pressured into it and that I needed to do it of my own decision. And so he recommended that I get baptized with you. And so I was like, well, yeah, I mean, I'd like to, because I really didn't remember the experience. So I thought it was cool that I would have the opportunity to do that as a man and actually remember it, be able to really remember the whole experience. So then Brother Rhodes baptized us both that night, and it was awesome. And I mean, once that happened, there was, because of the fact that I had told Brother Wright in the meeting, a few days before, that I just trusted God with the whole thing, and if it was his will, it would all work out. I said those words, and then that happened in the very next church service. It was like God saying to me, Kevin, this is my will. So I don't, he knows how to get my attention. And then like the way everything went with us getting our rings and everything, it all just seemed to drop perfectly into place. And it was like confirmation after confirmation. So that was like, what, early October?
No, it would have been like,
well, I had them
end of October. So I don't know. I don't know when you got them.
Well, what I mean is I had the meeting in early October. Yeah. So it was probably early October that we got baptized. Yeah. And then we were engaged by mid-November, and then married the following May. So we didn't even know each other a year before we were married.
Yeah.
So
it's not, there's been worse.
Yeah. But I guess that sort of brings us to the end of this part of our life. And I mean, is there anything you want to add? I mean, this has been your testimony. So is there anything you want to add to that?
I don't think so.
What's your experience? After being baptized and everything and leading up to when we got married, were there any more experiences where God confirmed or where you doubted?
No, I don't think so. I think it was just, I don't know, I just had peace through the whole thing. And that was, there were little things like I wanted to make sure that certain people in my life approved of you and liked you. And it just felt like a lot of just green lights all the way. And that to me was my, like security or safety net, that it wasn't just me that felt good about things. Everyone else felt good about things too. And yeah, I just kind of enjoyed the good times.
Yeah. Well, that pretty much brings us to the end then. I guess what I would like to wrap this up with, Amy, is going back. There may be someone listening to this who hears your story, and the relationship with your father and all that whole experience, and they may find a piece of that story that they can relate to. And I wonder if you could offer some advice to someone out there who is in a similar situation, looking for a way out, looking to grab a hold of God. What's one thing they can do to help them in that moment? What's one piece of advice for someone in that situation who's looking? If you can just think that there's someone out there listening right now, what would you tell them?
Well, I would definitely say to do whatever you can to ground yourself in the Bible, whether it's finding a translation that you can read and relate to, something easier to read than maybe the King James, even if it's, the Message Bible, just really to begin with, just to really get rooted and do what I did and just ask God to reveal himself to you and, sit down and say, what are you saying to me today? What do you want me to hear today? And just be still and wait until he speaks to you and keep seeking him out. And another thing is something that I did not struggle with because of the time that I grew up in, but I would get out of social media and get away from all of the distractions. I feel very blessed that I did not have those distractions. I did not have a TV in my room. I did not have a cell phone. I didn't have all of these other things. It was easy for me to discipline myself to walk away from the living room TV and to go in my room and just seek his face. And it's not that easy anymore. And I think that's a huge, huge issue that people of all ages are facing, myself included. The distractions are just, I don't know if I would be where I am right now if I had a cell phone with Instagram and Facebook and whatever else. I had a choice to not go to the Bible first or whatever, but it was easier. It was an easier choice than I think people have now. And so I would seek to silence all of the distractions and just focus on God and pray that for him to lead the right people into your life, the right support system. I think that's what I would do.
That's awesome. That's amazing advice. All right. So that brings us to a close, everybody. Amy, I want to thank you so much for being willing to come on here and share your testimony. And this won't be the last time because I did promise you in episode 1 that we were going to tell our story, like, the, what do you call it? The sequel. So you've gotten my testimony, you've gotten Amy's testimony, and in some future episode, you will get our testimony because we do have a pretty good story going from there. So yeah, that's a wrap, right?
Yep.
Anything else?
No.
All right. Thanks again, Amy, and God bless you. And with that, Amy has stepped down from the stand. And Amy, thank you again for being so open with your testimony and for sharing that with us. And what an amazing testimony that was, and proof that God is indeed listening. I hope that if you've been wondering if God can hear you or if he's even there, that you can walk away from this episode feeling encouraged. Now, ironically, this episode will be released on Mother's Day. And I say ironic because, as you know, Amy is the mother of my children. And it gives me the opportunity to express my deep gratitude to her for everything she has done for me and our family. I've often heard my bishop say that he has 2 saviors, his wife and Jesus. And I have to say, I feel exactly the same way about my wife. I'm positive that I would not be saved today if it wasn't for Amy being in my life and by my side. And I feel blessed that I have the opportunity to come on here and say it publicly. I would also be remiss if I didn't wish my mother-in-law Mary and my own mother Luann a very happy Mother's Day. And to all you moms out there holding it down, I know it probably seems like a thankless job, especially when you're doing nothing but changing diapers and making dinner and washing the dishes and doing the laundry and folding the clothes and picking up everybody's mess. And many of you do that and still hold down 9-to-5 jobs. The days drag on, but the years fly by. And only God knows the effect you're having on your kids. And I mean this from the bottom of my heart. This is the truth. The effect that you're having on your kids is changing the world. So please, don't ever sell yourself short as a mother. You matter. So happy Mother's Day from the Witness Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a like or leave us a review. And like I always say, most importantly, share it with someone that you know could use some encouragement from it. Maybe even share it with your mom. If you want to be notified every time a new episode drops, make sure you subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow us on Instagram, where I post additional pictures, reels, and other content. That's it for this week. Until next time, we are adjourned.